Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the LCI Green Room. I'm Jacob Winograd, host of the Biblical Anarchy podcast here at the Libertarian Christian Institute, which is part of our Christians for Liberty network. And glad to be back with you guys here in the Green Room. I haven't gone live in actually, I think about a month, other than the quick update I did with Norman Horn on our new book a couple weeks ago, which, by the way, that is available for pre-order still, coming out soon next week. Our new book on COVID-19 and the church and technology and just the different challenges that the lockdowns presented to the church, and kind of taking a look back and seeing what we can learn about that from multiple angles, not just the role of government, but the importance of church and community and things like that. So definitely check that out. That's the book is called House Divided. So you can go to housedividedbook.com to check that out and pre-order it. But tonight I am excited to talk to our guest who's with us, Martha Bueno, who is a libertarian activist and has been long involved in the liberty movement, not just here in the States, but also across Latin America. So Martha, how are you doing tonight?
I am doing fantastic. Thanks so much for having me on.
Of course. Martha, you're, I think, pretty popular in the circles that we swim in. But for those in my audience who haven't heard of you, go ahead and just give yourself a little bit of a introduction, your sort of like, how I became a libertarian story, and, just, some of the interesting things that you do.
Sure. So I became a libertarian in the early 2000s. I thought it was a dirty word. I didn't know what a libertarian was. And my uncle one day tells me, I think you're a libertarian. And I was like, insulted. And I looked it up and I was like, oh yeah, that sounds a lot like me. I think I am a libertarian. Became a libertarian after I voted for George W. Bush the first time around in 2000 when I thought I was a Republican and realized that nope, no, I'm not. And yeah, I've been part of the Libertarian Party since 2016 officially. Um, doing all sorts of work. I was the vice chair of the Libertarian Party of Miami-Dade. I volunteered for Gary Johnson's campaign. I volunteered for Joe Jorgensen's campaign in 2020. I was her Hispanic outreach with another friend of mine, with Zach Foster. And together with $0, we got 5% more Hispanic votes for Jorgensen than we did for Gary Johnson. So done a little bit of everything. More recently, people know me for my work with Free Ross, with Ross Ulbricht's mother. He was facing a 240-year sentence, and we got President Trump to pardon him. So that was really exciting. And just this past week, went and fought here locally to get fluoride removed from our water. And we find out on Friday if our mayor is going to veto that. And if she does not, then we are free of fluoride in Miami-Dade County, over 3 million people. So a little bit of everything, just fighting for our rights all the way around.
Awesome. Yes. And we should start out by talking about Ross. And I feel bad. I haven't talked about Ross enough on this show, other than it was actually really cool that it worked out that I was going live with Spike Cohen the night that all happened. So it was like we had a whole like planned conversation, and we just ended up being like, hey, screw that. Let's talk about Ross being free. We did that for like an hour and a half, but I haven't talked enough about it since then. And I know that you, and there was a lot of people involved. Of course, no one more than Ross's mother, Lynn, but you've been done a lot with Lynn. I think you guys are friends and have traveled around a lot together, and we're advocating for Ross's case. So my audience is a kind of a crossover of libertarians who are going to already know about Ross, but then Christians who maybe have heard of him because of the pardoning, and that made some news and headlines, but don't really know the story. So why don't we just, for those who haven't heard about it, just explain, in the most succinct way you can, what happened to
Sure.
Ross, the whole Silk Road controversy, and why this cause was important to us who care about liberty.
Sure, absolutely. So Ross Ulbricht, for those that don't know, he is now he's a 40-year-old man, but at the time he was a 26-year-old man who had built a website, and it was basically eBay, but on the dark web. And, people hear the dark web and they get, oh my God, it's evil and nefarious. So he built a website on the dark web that you could transact pretty much like eBay, where you post, what you're selling, and you can buy things using Bitcoin. Because he's a libertarian, he believed in the free market. Ross allowed people to buy and sell pretty much anything as long as there wasn't a victim. So no child pornography, no murder for hire, no stolen goods. Like there were rules. But beyond that, you could buy or sell pretty much anything. And the number one thing that sold on the Silk Road was marijuana. But this was back early 2000s, 2010, sorry. And marijuana was illegal in most parts of the United States. Right now, it's legal in 39 states and counting, and hemp is legal. So, what we see today as pretty normal, back then was like, oh no, this really evil thing. He was selling marijuana, some psychedelic mushrooms. Actually, he wasn't selling, the website was. People would use it, like I said, like an eBay. You could list your drugs for sale and whatnot. And, as libertarians, we kind of believe that you should be able to buy and sell pretty much anything as long as you're not hurting other people. For that crime, the United States government gave him a 240-year sentence for the crime of building a website. And they accused him of all sorts of things, including hacking, which he never hacked. They charged him with a conspiracy to traffic or launder money and all sorts of conspiracy charges, but 240 years. His family took it all the way up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court refused to hear it. He was denied to be heard by the Supreme Court. So there was no other option than for him to get a presidential commutation, which is where they shorten your sentence to time served, or a pardon. When Donald Trump came to the Libertarian Party saying that he would like for us to vote for him in exchange, he told us he would give Ross a commutation. But on January 21st of this year, he actually gave Ross a full pardon, which means he gets back all of his rights. And I got involved. I had known about Ross since this happened. Before he got caught, I had gone on the Silk Road to check it out as a libertarian. I was like, this is so cool. Like, oh my gosh, I need to know about the Silk Road. I always say, unfortunately, I didn't buy anything because I would have then had some Bitcoin on hand. And we all know where Bitcoin is now. That would have been great. But I didn't buy anything on the Silk Road. I did not buy any Bitcoin at the time, whatever. And a few years ago, after 2020, I met Ross's mom, Lynn. I actually met her through another libertarian who was like, oh, hey, Lynn's moving to Miami. Does anyone have a place for Lynn to stay? And at the time, I had a room, that I could give to her. And I was like, yep, she can stay with me. She stayed with me for about 5 months. And I realized as she was here, I saw her working day in and day out for Ross, trying to do whatever she could to get his story out there, trying to do whatever she could to get closer to that pardon, to that, to somebody that could help her. And as the mother of 3 sons, 1 daughter, but 3 sons, I saw myself in her. I was like, oh my God, if something were to happen to my children like this, I mean, what would I do? She was, in her 60s when this happened. It's not like this is something that she was prepared for. She didn't have a background in how to deal with things politically. And so, she just started one day at a time, right? And I was like, I have to do everything I can to help her. She, at the time she was already in her 70s, she was slowing down, and it seemed like the impossible task. And so we traveled together. We, every door that she had opened for her, we bust that door down and walk through it. We're like, what can we do? How can we get this kid out of jail? What can we do? And so super grateful, especially grateful to all the libertarians who voted for Donald Trump to free Ross. I know that is super controversial now. And as I said before, I'm super proud to have freed Ross, and also super cringe that we voted for Donald Trump to do that. I do feel a heavy weight of that decision. I definitely think that there really weren't very many options. As libertarians, we know that one of the 2 candidates is going to win. It was either going to be Donald Trump or Kamala. Either or was like a bad place to be. So we got one of them. We were going to get him anyways. So I'm glad that we got Ross free, but definitely, now it's worse now than ever before. And I really wish that there were better options.
Yeah. No, I definitely want to talk about that because I also voted for Trump, largely one of the major considerations being that I wanted to see Ross freed. And I very similarly have mixed feelings now watching a lot of what Trump is doing. But to tie a bow on the Ross stuff, I mean, yeah, I mean, I have 5 children. I have 3 sons and 2 daughters, and I just can't even imagine that. I've never met Lynn. I hope to have the honor of meeting her at some point because it's just such an inspiration. I can't imagine just the strength she had to persevere for such a long time.
Mhm.
And as libertarians, we have so many different slogans and so many different causes, right? And there are many, unfortunately, people like Ross who have become victims of the state in various ways, who we still have to continue fighting for. And sometimes we it's hard to even fathom, like, maintaining hope for such a long period of time, right?
Yeah.
Um, and then I just can't imagine the joy. It was just amazing to be able to see photos of them reuniting, and it's such a just inspire. Oh, like, forget all the layers, like the liberty layer and policies and all that, but just on a human level, right? Just to see a family reunited, and we'll talk about all the stuff with Trump, but I think as much as that's about Ross and his family at that moment, it was also, I think, incredibly impactful that when Trump made the announcement that Ross was being freed, that he credited it to his mother and the
Mhm.
libertarian movement. And that put not just Ross on the map, that Trump was talking about him, but it was just one of many things over the last 6 months that pushed libertarianism into the forefront of the conversation. And so I hope that is in one thing that we can try to continue to capitalize on, is that libertarians had the reputation of being the ones who never stop fighting when anyone, one of our own or whatever, is unjustly locked up and has their rights stripped away from them. There's that expression, which sounds a little cliche sometimes, like all your rights all the time, and that's kind of like what we fought for Ross. And that he got that full part, and it's just amazing because now he can actually have his life back and at least be as free as the rest of us, right? That's the joke.
A
That's
lot
what's like.
freer than he was for sure,
Exactly.
but
Yeah.
and yes, I think that Trump was absolutely correct. So number one, Trump wanted the libertarian vote because he believed, and he said so on Laura Ingraham's program a few years back, after he was defeated by Biden. He said that it was the libertarians that had cost him that, because in the many states where he lost by such a small margin, and it was the margin that Joe Jorgensen had taken. So he believed, right or wrong, that it was the libertarians that cost him the 2020 election. And so that for him was like, I need to get the libertarian vote. And every time he met with Lynn, he was like, you need to get me that libertarian vote. That's what's going to make the difference. So I think that it shows Republicans, especially, probably Democrats too, that we libertarians, we're growing in numbers, and we have the option. Maybe we won't win an election just yet, but we have the ability to swing an election. We have the ability to choose between the two evil candidates, which one we decide is the lesser of the two evils. So we do have that power. And back to something you said, it is 100% Lynn. Lynn kept that fire alive. Ross was in prison for 11 and a half years, and Lynn kept that story alive. Most people, I'd go to Bitcoin conferences with her, and it'd be like, oh, Ross Ulbricht. And people are like, who? And the Bitcoin conference is the place that people should have known. That is the people that knew about Ross. So the fact that she was able to keep him alive in our hearts and minds for 11 and a half years is credited to her. I also want to say that I credit to her my new-ish found faith, because I watched what faith can do. And it was because of Lynn that I have completely changed my view on spirituality, on the universe, on God, on everything. And it was Lynn every day has this practice where she sits quietly and she listens. I guess people call it meditation, prayer, whatever you want to call it. But she listens quietly, and she heard, you need to speak with so and so, you need to do so and so, you need to go to this conference. And it was because of her doing that I believe that Ross was freed. She like the things started happening for her between meeting Angela McArdle, which I think was also a big shout out to her. She was a big reason why this happened. She set up, Trump's people came to her and said, hey, we want to get on that stage. And she said, well, I've got a list of demands for you. And amongst them was Ross Ulbricht's freedom. So, it was a lot of things, but I believe that, Lynn, just the way she handled herself, the way she was always like praising God and saying, this God's going to make this happen. This, it really was such an inspiration. And
Yeah.
I believe that she is, I say that she's the power of one. It's the power of what one person can achieve. If we each just do one thing, move that forward just a little bit every single day, we too can have what Lynn achieved. Like I said before, it's not that I think she's the most special woman ever, but there was nothing inherently in Lynn's background that made her perfect for this role. She didn't have public speaking, that wasn't like something she did. She didn't know how to go on podcasts. She didn't have the connections. She didn't have the political know-how. It was, I think about that situation she was in, how devastating it must have been for her in her 60s at a time where people are like, I'm going to go retire and, go live this wonderful life. She found her son, in this impossible 240-year sentence. The only way out, as she says, is death in a body bag. That he was going to get out of prison in a body bag or with a presidential pardon or commutation. There was no other option. And so I just, I think it's so magical what I got to experience. I got a front row seat to this miracle. And I think it is absolutely incredible. And Lynn is somebody who is absolutely incredible.
Yeah, it really is. And I agree so much with what you said there that, sometimes I think as libertarians, we're used to complaining a lot and being right about a lot of things, but that we don't always appreciate how we can make a difference. And this is an example of that, even just one of us, right? Or just a select few people who refuse to give up can make a difference. And if we all, and, it's really tough because it's a sacrifice, right? Because, you have a family and a career. I have a family and career, and we all set aside time to do things, to be advocates for different causes under the umbrella of liberty, and that costs time, that costs money. And when you don't see, a lot, not that we have zero wins. Even before Ross, there have been wins, but they are far and few between. And so this is really encouraging, and I think it should, like I think as a Christian especially, I remember like one of the passages that means the most to me is where Jesus says, that which you've done unto the least of these, you've done unto me. And so, I just think that that's something that really motivates me to speak out for those who are the victims of state violence and injustice, because if that's a mother advocating for her son, right? And who's been a victim, and that could be one of our children. And we
Absolutely.
so yeah, there's a lot of crossover there in terms of
And we're not
the
going to
voting.
stop. She hasn't quite come out with it yet. So this is kind of just like a little teaser, but we learned a lot along this path. And there's so many people in jail, unjustly incarcerated in the United States, especially people of color, especially Blacks and Hispanics. We make the the largest prison population. It is very unfair. It's a very horrible system. And so we're going to keep going because we learned some stuff on this journey. And if everybody had a mother like Lynn, we wouldn't be needed. But since she managed to get it done, and we just celebrated her birthday, our joint birthdays. We were 3 days apart in birthdays in DC, and I went to visit her in Richmond. And yeah, we've decided that we're not going to stop. We need to keep doing this. There's so many people like Ross that
Yeah.
need help, and it's such an incredible feeling to be able to help somebody, and especially somebody that doesn't have, like, again, Ross was very lucky. Ross had Lynn. It's a miracle to have somebody like that, but we really want to keep going. We want to keep this momentum, especially now these next 3.5 years with Trump in office. We feel like we've managed to create a kind of sort of door there. It's not like we have Trump on speed dial, but maybe we can get some more stuff done and really advance some freedom. But we'll disclose the full plan shortly. But yeah, I'm really excited for this. It's exciting. We're gonna hopefully do a few more of these.
Yeah, that'll be great to see. So we've alluded to our sort of complicated feelings now that Ross is free, that, part of doing so was voting for Trump. And this, of course, has been incredibly divisive in libertarian circles, which is not hard to do, to be fair. But I mean, having any kind of opinion can be divisive in libertarian circles. But this does seem to be especially vitriolic. And I've even been, just in the last few days, been railing against libertarians and anarchists of, different stripes, because they go, well, yeah, we're happy that Ross is free, but it wasn't worth the cost because Trump is passing tariffs, and yeah, tariffs are bad, and Trump's, continuing to support Israel and its, war in Gaza, which is, a either close to or an actual genocide of the Palestinians. He's not completely delivered, other things like bringing peace to the problems going on between Ukraine and Russia. There's a lot of things that we can be critical of Donald Trump for, and they feel like we've compromised our principles by voting for him. And I don't know, like, the way I viewed it was sort of like, well, generally speaking, every election, it feels like you typically do kind of not see a big difference. Maybe in rhetoric you do, but like from like in my lifetime, Clinton to Bush to Obama to Trump to Biden to,
Trump
Trump
again.
again, the things that people are concerned about: immigration, the war on drugs, the military industrial complex and endless wars. It's like that's kind of, those are unfortunately bipartisan issues, right? That they
Right.
just kind of continue. Like Obama deported more people than I think even Trump did, at least the first time around. We'll see what goes around this time. But how do you approach that? Because on one hand, I I am, of course, grieved by that. I mean,
Hmm.
I'm it's not as close to home for me as it is for you, the issue of immigration. But I see all the cry, the deportations being threatened, and the crackdowns on immigration, which is also separating, families and putting people in jail and incarcerated. So I guess the argument to steelman it is that, well, you freed Ross, but now with Trump in office, you're creating more Rosses, and so you've perpetuated the problem. I guess I hear that, but I just, even though, like, just to be clear, like,
But what's the
philosophically,
solution?
right? Like, I think philosophically,
What's the
I am an
solution? If those
anarchist,
libertarians could tell us
right?
what the solution to end all of these government problems are, I'd be super thrilled to go fight for that. But we don't have a solution. We've been trying for 50 years to get a presidential candidate that can get even close to the White House. And honestly, after, being so close to the Joe Jorgensen Spike Cohen campaign, I realized that it's not that we failed. It's that there's no real path for a third party to reach that level. We need something that we don't have, which is somebody extremely famous, extremely wealthy. Even still, I mean, look at Kanye West, couldn't even get on, let alone the ballot. He couldn't even get votes. I mean, it's so complicated because the rules for third party is so completely different to Republicans and Democrats. In most states, they're just automatically on the ballot. We have to fight for it every single time, which takes a lot of money, time, effort, volunteers. So if a libertarian could tell me what the solution was that would stop either a Trump or Kamala getting into office, I'm totally here for that. Like, let me know. Of course, all of these issues are horrible, and there are libertarian solutions to all of them. But let's be honest, the government isn't about solutions. They're about
No.
creating more division. The more they can divide us, the more they can have us at each other's throats fighting. And you see it amongst Republicans, amongst Democrats, amongst anarchists, amongst libertarians. I mean, we will fight, it's like, oh my God, and we'll fight about anything. And so the more that they can have us fighting, the more likely it is that we're paying attention to that fighting and not to solving actual issues. If we come together, we might actually solve issues. But we can't have that because we're fighting. We're like, oh my God, Kamala's terrible. No, Trump is terrible. No, Kamala's terrible. Like, and it's like this back and forth. We're never going to solve those problems. And I think that's something else that I learned in this last round, which is let's focus on issues and fight for those issues. For example, I just mentioned here in Miami, we had fluoride in our water. Still do. It's not gone yet. We're still, but fluoride, it's an issue that I think most people, especially health conscious people, are like, you know what, we shouldn't have that. I equate it to the COVID issue, which is if you want to get a vaccine, by golly, you go get it, but don't force me to get something that I don't want. If you want fluoride, brush your teeth with it, put it into your water, bathe with it, whatever you want. But I don't want fluoride in my water, and I don't want to have to spend thousands of dollars for a filter to remove it from the water supply that we get. Plus, now I get to drink it, bathe with it, water my plants with it, wash my clothes with it. It's like I don't need that much fluoride. Nobody does, and it's causing issues in children. So instead of, well, we're going to put a libertarian into that position to fight for this, what ended up happening is we all went and backed the commissioner who had put it on the agenda, and we spoke, and we commended him for his efforts, and we got it done. A lot of people, not just libertarians, there were a lot of activists in that room, a lot of people that really cared about it and worked towards it. And I think that is the solution. Libertarians, we like to sit on our computers and complain and be like, oh my God, this isn't perfect, let's complain about it. You know what? Pick a thing. Go fight for it. Go to your local commission, go to your local city council, go to your local whatever, and fight for that one thing. If you want, I don't know, if immigration is an issue that you really care about, I'm sure there's things you can do. For example, the big issue, I think, with immigration is welfare. Most Americans are like, well, immigrants shouldn't be taking, money. Great. I agree with you. Let's fight so that government doesn't give immigrants welfare. Let's go ahead and do that. That's one issue I think we can get Democrats, Republicans, and Libertarians all on board. Let's go for one thing. And I think that's just, we're going to keep coming back to this point. Libertarians, we want all or nothing. We're not interested in incrementalism, which is, I think, where our solutions are going to be found. It's in incremental freedoms. It's in incremental things, because that's how the government takes our freedoms away. It's incrementally. They don't just start off like, it wasn't 250 years ago that they're like, we're going to spy on every single American. No, it started little by little. 9/11 came around. They're like, here's the Patriot Act. We need to know everything about you, where you're banking, where you got that money. We have access to all your things. It's incremental how they take away our freedoms. It needs to be incremental how we gain them back. That's the way we're going to solve it. So, going back to that libertarian thing, stop complaining, get out there, find something, just do it.
Well, so I was listening to you on the Aiming Up podcast with Brent, who I like Brent. It's a friend of mine. I've been on his show as well. And so like I align with him philosophically because I'm also an anarchist. And I heard him say when you guys were talking about this, like, well, like he's like, well, I guess the solution to him isn't political. It's just we have to achieve like a critical mass of people who just like believe in liberty. And I sort of agree, but it's like, okay, but how do you do that? Because I just don't think, not that we don't listen, like there's a division of labor, I think, right? Like, of course we need people out there who are telling people to read Mises and Hayek and Bastiat and Rothbard and all the great libertarian, writers and thinkers of yesteryear and today, right? Get people to listen to Spike Cohen and Bob Murphy and people from the Libertarian Institute or Reason. And there's a lot of great libertarians, and
Even
education is, and
where we can find it.
Right. And there's a lot of great libertarians who are doing great work on that ground, but there's this expression, right, that like people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And sometimes I feel like there's a couple things that keep people from embracing our ideas or wanting to identify as libertarian. And it's not that they even don't like, maybe they would be persuaded of our ideas, but I think for a lot of people, they don't care fundamentally, first and foremost, about the abstract principles. They care about people. They care about the issues, right? And if all we have to offer to people is that, like, well, we're right about everything, and here's how society could work without government, but then we're not actually showing that we care enough to be putting skin in the game to actually do what we can, even against all odds, to help someone like a Ross Ulbricht, right? Help someone like a Raj Rivera. It's like, it's one thing to sit there and point out how we have the world's biggest prison population, it's another thing to go out there and to actually try to set some people free. And might that mean, like, compromises with people who are statists and politicians who do abhorrent things? Like, I guess maybe, but are you willing to look the victims of state violence in the face and be like, well, we could have all united to try to, free your husband or your son or, friend or neighbor from prison, but that would have violated our principles. Like, I think
Right.
that sounds like the worst message, to be like, my principles that I want you to believe in tell me that I can't do anything to help you. Like that,
Right.
I think there's something broken in that equation that
Absolutely.
it feels like a lot of libertarians and anarchists are not able to see for some reason.
Yeah, and that's exactly my point. It's like it's easy to be like, well, I didn't want to vote for Donald Trump because, he's all these horrible things. And it's like, I agree with you wholeheartedly. Like I didn't really want to vote for him either. And I actually made a pact with myself that I won't be voting moving forward. It's just not something that I believe in. I think that, so there's this thing that was worthless to me, which was my vote. And I traded that for the son of my friend, for his freedom, for somebody who, I believe Ross hasn't finished his work here on earth, and I know that one day he'll do something amazing, and if he doesn't, that's okay too. I'm just saying, it was a worthless thing in exchange for that. And libertarians, we have this problem where we want perfection. I keep going back to it because it's like, you talk to libertarians and it's like, well, but I can't vote for Donald Trump, or I can't do this thing. And again, it needs to be perfect in some way. And we're just never going to get there. So find that one thing that you're passionate about, and keep doing it. I've been passionate about my local, local politics, care about what happens here in my county. And so I'm going to keep doing this thing. I realized this last go around that we can accomplish a lot more with sugar than we ever could with vinegar. And I was very well known amongst the libertarian circles on X, especially for being very much vinegar, and going after the politicians. And I ran for office, and I ran for office attacking my opponent for, yeah, he was corrupt and he had all this corruption, but now he's the chair of the commission. And so how do I go to the chair of my commission, my neighbor, and say, hey, let's work together after I attacked him? While I mean, it's definitely what libertarians we love to do. We talk about tar and feather, but when was the last time a libertarian actually went and tarred and feathered, a politician? It's a lot of talk. It's a lot of talk and not really real. So now I'm in this position where I can't really go to, my commissioner and say, hey, I need help with this issue because I attacked him. So, there's a lot more we can achieve with. I don't agree with him. I don't agree with him on a lot. But hey, commissioner, hey, can we work together on, for example, one of the things, the commissioner that passed the fluoride, Rob Gonzalez, I had attacked him in the past for giving money to an organization that didn't even ask him for money. It was one of his clients. And he didn't quite like that very much. But this time around, I made sure to thank him for what he did and ask him that once we accomplish the fluoride, can we move forward and remove, for example, the forever chemicals for the water next? And he was like, yeah, that's great. We can work together on these issues that matter to both of us. And that is what I care about. And
Yeah.
I had been going about this all wrong. It's a mighty humbling lesson when you realize that for the past 10 plus years, I've been doing my work as an advocate in the wrong way. And I credit again Lynn and all this new awakening that I've gone through in the last 3 years, thanks to the journey I've been on with her, watching her do things. And to be honest, she never, I mean, at the very beginning, I guess she kind of did go against the state and like, oh, they have my, and then she stopped. She absolutely stopped, and she found what she needed to do, and do so with kindness and with grace, and talking to people she didn't agree with, but saying, hey, can we compromise? Can you help me with my son? Can I count on you to do this thing? Can I count on you to introduce me to other people? Can I count on you to do? And people were really great and absolutely
Yeah.
helped. So I
Well,
think that there's like a middle ground there. Maybe not attack the politicians. We all might agree, and we all online could be like, ah, this guy's horrible. But get out there in your community, work with people. People aren't as partisan as you think.
Well, and it occurs to me that also, like, maybe you aren't good at holding your tongue or compromise, and that's fine, but then don't attack the people who feel like that is their skill set and that is the lane they want to choose. Because I think there is room for people in the movement who are going to be your diehard purists and who are pushing the Overton window that way with education and with like just being unrelenting in their message. But then, like, we need to have a kind of a ceasefire in the movement to be like, you know what, some people are going to go that route and some people are going to engage in the political process in different ways to try to, work with people, not necessarily attack them, even though they probably would agree with a lot of those,
Attacks.
smears and stuff. But they're going
Yeah,
to instead try to, and like, we should just focus on all doing, that's free market libertarian principles at play,
absolutely.
right? Like, we
Look
can't
at Spike
centrally
Cohen.
plan liberty. So some people are
Yeah.
going to take one path, some people are going to perform a different role, and that's okay. And I just want to say, like, I don't want this to come across as patronizing, but like, there's a real strength of character in you admitting that you were going about things the wrong way. And it's funny you brought up Dave Smith earlier because I'm friends with Dave Smith, and I remember that you used to, like, take some shots at him because you didn't agree with his views on immigration, which I don't entirely agree with his views on
And I
immigration
still don't
either.
agree with it.
And
And
you still don't
yeah,
agree, and that's
we
fine. But
still
you know
don't
what?
agree.
But I appreciate where
I
you
like
are
his
now.
stances on the war. I think that he is an absolute authority on what he speaks on war issues. And so I don't have to agree with him 100% of the way. I don't have
Right.
to, everything he says has to resonate with me to understand that we're on the same team. Same thing with Spike Cohen. He goes out there and he gets things done by going to the local level, by getting together with the community. And he's done some amazing things, especially for families that have had their children taken away. So
Yeah.
there are several people within this libertarian community that are doing amazing work. And I think that they are an inspiration for all of us. That's what we should be doing. We should be providing more freedom. And once people see you do that, once people see that you care, like you said earlier, and that you are achieving things, people start joining your cause. you know I think that that's one of those things. Now that you've seen that Lynn was able to free her son, I mean, she's pretty effective. It's more likely that people will join her cause in the future, and she'll have even more resources. So let's keep working together to get these things done. It's just, I think
Yeah.
it became clear. It's
Well, it also occurs to me, and this can transition to a different topic, but it's all related, of course, because I think we can have sort of like a dual approach where we are doing some things that are dealing with the immediate short-term problems where we're trying to work on particular policy goals, we're trying to free certain people, but then we also, that doesn't, it's not mutually exclusive that you can do that while also pursuing that generational change. And something that you also talked to Brent about and that you talk a lot about, I've seen you talk on social media before about it, is how we parent our children. And I know you're an advocate of, I guess there's different names for it, peaceful parenting or different things like that. Some people call it gentle parenting. I don't know. I don't necessarily like using a label, but just the idea that, like, we shouldn't, spank our children, and we should try to sort of, have a model of parenting that's not based on like an authoritarian model. Not that we don't have authority, but that it's a more of like, the way I look at it is it's a leadership parenting, right? Like, my job
right.
is to lead my children, not to be a tyrant to them. And then if I'm a tyrant to my children, then I'm conditioning in them this idea that that's the way the world works. And so
Hmm.
it's one of those things that I think contributes, many drops in the bucket that contributes to why many people just sort of accept de facto people who are in authority and listen to them. And
Right.
we don't necessarily want that. We want to normalize, I think, in our children that there will be people who take different authority positions in life, but you should follow people because they've earned that, not because
Hmm.
they dictate it by force and fiat. So what's your approach to this in terms of how you've parented your children, how your views have evolved? Because I'm sure, I know, at least in my case, like, I started out thinking I knew exactly how I was going to do it, and then 5 kids in, I still have that, the initial presuppositions I've had, but I've had to, you know, mature into it and realize that there's a little bit of nuance there while still, not uh resorting to spanking and things like that. So
Yeah,
So yeah.
absolutely. So my views have changed over the years. Again, my children are probably much older than yours. My oldest is 24 and my youngest is now is a month away from being 16. So I'm solidly out of the little kid stage and now have mostly adults and young teens. And so when I first became a parent, I did what I had seen. I repeated patterns. It's like a lot of no, a lot of, hand swatting, or, it was also very big at the time, the timeouts, and just, and I realized that that really wasn't teaching them what I wanted them to learn. I wanted them to be safe, but I didn't want to spend my time being like, no, you can't do it. Like, you teach them this is why, because it's going to hurt. And to some degree, if it's not really that dangerous, you let them get a little bit hurt. You let them experience why you're telling them this. I would say, like, I just want you to be safe, and this hurts. This is a problem, and you can kind of talk to them. They're mini humans, but they totally understand. And when you're gentle like that, you can redirect. It's like a puppy. Puppy's biting something. You don't smack the puppy because the puppy has no idea why you're doing it. You just redirect them to something they can actually chew, or so when your child is misbehaving, you find something that they can do that isn't, that won't get hurt or whatever. And it's easy to say now. It's a lot harder when you're going through it. I'm sure you're experiencing that with that five. But yeah, if you can, just be a little more gentle and realize that your kids, they actually respect you and they listen to you. In America, it's always like, oh, you just wait. Once your kids are a certain age, they won't respect you. Are you kidding me? My kids know that, when I tell them things, I'm telling them the truth, and it's the truth because I care. So if their friends are like, hey, let's do this drug, it's like, um, my mom told me about that, and actually she said that if I wanted to do it, I should probably do it with her and not with my friends, so that I'm talking specifically about marijuana. It's like, don't go do that with your friends, because you don't know how you're going to react. And what if you're like at a party and something happens? I just think that being honest to your children, being truthful to them, making sure that they know that it's because you care, not because you're trying to scare them. For me, a lot of conversations with my parents was like, don't do that. That is wrong. End of story. And it's like, well, my mom doesn't know what she's talking about, so I'm going to go out and do it. In this case, we have conversations. We're just able to talk to one another. They're able to bring the whole story to me, and I'm able to guide them without telling them you can't do that or you shouldn't do that. It's mostly like, I wouldn't do that for these reasons, but ultimately the decision is yours. And that is so empowering, especially for teenagers, where most people are telling them, you don't know anything, you're this kid, what do you know? It's like, hey, this is my experience, or this is what I would do, but it's not my life, it's yours. Kind of takes that pressure off of, well, I'm going to go defy my parents now. It's like, there's no defying. We'll deal with the consequences of what you choose together, but I really wouldn't do that. And it kind of changes the paradigm.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Like, there's a lot of times where sometimes I get annoyed because, like, sometimes like you're busy and your kids are talking a lot, especially in my case where I have five, and I have to like remind myself like it's good, but like my kids come and ask me a lot for my opinion on things, and sometimes I'm like, I don't know, just do what you want. But I realize like, no, my kids actually value my input, right? They actually like,
Hmm.
because I've, again, imperfectly, many mistakes, and all parents make mistakes, and
All parents make
I
mistakes.
right, and I want people hearing this to not to I don't want them to hear that, like, if you've ever spanked your child or you've ever used timeout or anything, that you're a bad parent. I just think that there's
I did
better
all of
ways
those
to.
things.
Yeah,
I
I
did
have
all of them.
too.
And I've apologized to my children as well. And I think that's super empowering too, is to be like, hey, guess
Yeah.
what, kid? I messed up. I had no idea what I was doing, but I'm sorry. And, I didn't mean to. And I think that that too is a great part. As parents, you always have the ability to make amends.
Oh, yeah. I mean, absolutely. I mean, it's like, how do we expect I mean, like, I think that one of my guiding principles is like, I cannot expect my children to do something that I myself don't model and lead by example on doing. So, like, how can I
100%.
expect my children to, a couple examples, like, how can I expect my children to actually your example, to apologize if I don't ever like model for them that like, hey, I make mistakes, including to them, and I need to apologize for that, and to
Mhm.
actually like make it better. Like the way we do things like in my household is like if like we have certain rules, and if it's not just for the kids, it's for the adults too. But then our consequences aren't always like aimed at being punitive. They're more like, well, how do I make that up to you? Right. Like, so
Right.
like one of my rules is because I think we all struggle with it, is these stupid things, right? Being on
Mhm.
them too much. So I have a rule in my house, which is that when I get home from work, that like unless it's an emergency or like it's something work related, um, but during family time, I'm not gonna have the phone on me. I'm not gonna pull it out and check it. And if I do, like if I forget lapse or I just like, I'm like, oh, I'm just gonna look really quick. And then they see me, like, oh, you're on your phone. It's like, all right, what do you want? Usually it's like, I got to get them ice cream, right? Or I have to go play a game with them or something, right? It's like, because I only have so much time with them, and
Yep.
my time with them is important to them. And so if they don't like when like I found that out quickly. Um, when you have kids who aren't afraid of you, who actually want to talk to you, they notice things and they tell you things. And like I remember like a few years ago, one of my kids was just like, Daddy, why do you use your phone so much? And like, again, initially because this is tough, right? Like, I know you talked about this with Brent that like we sometimes start saying things that like when you realize like I'm just repeating the stuff that was said to me, right? So like
Right.
sometimes my initial reaction is to be like, "How dare you ask me that?" And I'm like, "Wait, no,
Right.
it's a perfectly
But how
reasonable
can you
question
ask
to
them
ask."
later not to be addicted to a device, whether it's a
Right.
video game, whether it's their
Yep.
iPad, whether it's your iPhone, if you're addicted to it and you refuse to accept that as well? So I think
Yep.
what you're doing is absolutely powerful because it teaches your children that, hey, we're not perfect. We are sometimes addicted to our devices. But the important thing is you're working on it. And when they call you out, that you acknowledge that oops, I lapsed, I messed up, let me make this time up to you. But further, what you were saying, your kids want to hear from you. And isn't that so different to what you heard all along? It's like your kids, they don't care about what you're saying, they care about their friends. I've found that doing exactly what you're talking about and doing, that my kids actually want to hang out with me. And now I have two that are complete adults. And my daughter's just turned 21, and she has a job, and she comes home. And when she comes home, the first thing we do is we have a coffee together and we talk about her day. And she asks for my opinion, and she still wants to hear from me and still wants me to hear about her day and give her advice and whatnot. And I think it's so special, that we
Yeah.
can continue these relationships with our children long, very far into our lives, and hopefully be a part of the next generation and maybe even the generation after that. So this change that we're having from how our parents raised us to how we're raising our kids, I think is going to lead to that. I think, and I talk about this quite a bit too, where I live in a multi-generational house. My mother lives here, my children still live here. And I really would like to have that going for as long as humanly possible, because it's, we really need to like stop this kids move away and just like, I mean, you don't have to, certainly can live that life if that's for you, but I don't want that life. I want to be able to enjoy my family. And I feel so sad when parents are like, oh, my kid moved to the other extreme side of the United States because we couldn't live together. I'm like, what? That's crazy. Why do you want that? Isn't the whole point of having children to enjoy them and
Yeah.
enjoy what comes next? I can't wait to be a grandmother.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And it's always so sad, like when I hear other parents and like, and again, like this is tough because like I don't want to be judgmental, and I'm not saying that like we all sometimes need breaks. And again, I have 5 kids. There are definitely times where I'm just like, I need some
Listen,
alone
I've got
time. I
four. You
can't,
only have
I
one
can't hear
more, okay?
yeah. Right. So I'm sure know it too, right? Four is a lot. Anything over 3 is a lot. Like 1 or 2 is
One
like,
is a lot.
yeah. I mean, that's true.
No, I'm gonna say the first one is probably the hardest because you had no idea what you were doing. Going from 0 children to 1, I think is the hardest one.
Mm,
And so parents who have only 1, like, don't feel bad. When I had 1, I was like, "Oh my god, how do you have more than 1? This is so difficult. How do you divide your time?" And then you have a second one, you're like, "That first one, that one was easy. Having 2 is hard." And then you have the third, and you're like, that having two was so easy. This having three is so hard, and so on and so forth. But yeah, that first one, because that's the one that changes you for real, from being it's all
Yes.
about me to now I have to worry about this person and make sure that this person is better, doing better than I am. This
That's a good
person is,
point. Yeah.
it's the hardest one, going from a selfish person, which everybody is without children. I don't care how many dogs you have. You tend to be a very selfish person because it's all about you. You want to leave your house and you just grab your keys and go. You have a baby, it's like diapers and whatever, and they're like, it just changes you fundamentally. So I really
Yeah.
think that the first one is the hardest. And so yeah,
No,
once you've
that's a
gotten to 4 and 5, we know what we're doing.
right.
We got this. Like, come on, my fourth was my easiest child by far. I knew exactly what I was doing with them.
No, I never thought about it that way, but I think that's actually accurate. That like because there's a transition in like your identity and just like how you live your life. That it's not for you first and foremost.
Right.
But yeah, there's
It's
just
the
some
kid that
things.
made you a father, that
Right.
made me a mother. Like that kid, that's the one that we really messed up the most, for sure.
Yeah, no, like Bria and I have talked about that a lot, and my wife's named Bria. Yeah, it's tough. Like and but at the same time, like because like when they get older and old enough, you can talk to them about that. Just be like, hey, listen, like I know that like some of the things that like we did when you were younger compared to now, like we had no idea what we were doing. Like, and just be
No.
honest about that, right? That's a good
Yep.
bonding moment, even, and just and they appreciate that, right? I just
Hmm.
like what you said before about enjoying your kids, like again, I don't want this to be judgmental, but there's something sad. Like I get very sad when I hear some parents, because we homeschool our kids, and hear other parents go like, oh, I can't wait for like when it's like summer vacation, I can't wait for school to start again. And I'm just like, I can't. Maybe like I get it, like you need a little break or something, like, but it just. I hope that, like, what if your kids heard you say that? Like the message of like, oh, I can't wait until my kids aren't around me. Like that's just
How
such a
sad.
backwards. Like I just don't understand as a parent how you again yeah, listen, it's not that I never tell my kids, hey, listen, mommy and daddy like need a little break. We need some alone time, like, and that's fine. Another thing to be like, I need you to not be here every day, right? For the
Right.
majority of the day. Like that's yeah, again, and
I
again,
heard
no
that so
judgment.
much
No judgment to
when,
parents
yeah.
who can't homeschool for like financial reasons or logistical.
I
Like I
didn't
get that,
homeschool.
but
I don't I didn't have the benefit of this movement. So like I said, my son's 24, my oldest.
right.
And this wasn't a thing. Homeschooling wasn't even legal, really. So I did not do that. And I wish I would have, but I didn't. Too late now. So, like it's whatever, it is what it is. But, I heard that over the years in my kids' school. I was always a parent that worked in the school in some way. Always did the book fair, or the parent that went on the field trips. And so many parents were like, oh my god, I need school to start again, I can't stand having them at home. And I would just be like, oh my god, your child just heard you say that. Your child thinks that they are a burden, and that they are, and it's
Yeah, I
just,
know.
it breaks
Oh,
my heart. It breaks my heart. And that's the other thing I've discovered with kind of this mellow parenting is you understand at some point, or at least I hope people understand, that each of us were born perfect. We were born, you know whatever you were born in this perfect little person. And then each one of those dings along the way, whether it was a physical abuse, whether it was something your parents said, whether it was something a friend said, kind of dings you and kind of, scars you. If you've ever raised a plant and you have this perfect little plant, but then you come around with a weed whacker and you slash it a little bit, that plant just kind of doesn't recover the same. And I feel like that's us humans. Everybody has these traumas, and those are those traumas. So the more you inflict upon that person, the harder it is for them to maybe reach this point where they can have these type of relationships, where they trust people, where they love people, where, and so I think now my job is to really make sure that any of those dings that I did cause in my children, that I atone for them, that I say, hey, I didn't mean to cause this in you. I didn't mean for you to feel like maybe I was tired of having you around, or whatever the case
yeah,
may be.
yeah,
And I think that that's something, again, that a lot of people can do. It's just understand that your words have power. They have an incredible amount of power. And when you tell your kid, like, oh my god, you're so annoying, that hurts.
Yeah.
And that will cause them to think that they themselves, their presence is annoying and is annoying to other people, and will potentially cause them to have this damage moving forward. So, it's okay if you say it, but please, if you remember, if it's something that you realize, go back to your child at any age and be like, mommy, daddy didn't mean that. I didn't mean that. Yeah, you're not annoying. You're not a bother. And I've come around to now when my kids are like, oh my God, little kids are so, I never want to have children. I'm like, the greatest thing I've ever done in my life, 100%, take everything else I've ever done, is be your mother. Like, never forget that. I don't want them to go into life thinking that kids are a burden. I think sincerely, the best thing we do as humans is create more humans, especially good ones.
100%. I mean, as a Christian, there's the phrase, man will leave his mother and father, find his wife, and then go be fruitful and multiply. I think that's like the one of the most fundamental important purposes of life here on earth. And, it's just and I think that's it's not just for me a Christian mandate. It's also, I think, important to, again, to this whole idea of trying to advance liberty, because I think it does start at home. It starts with the values we teach our children, which then they take out into the world. And, that all adds up, right? At the end of the
Hmm.
day. So
Create
that's
good
one
humans.
of the, yeah, it's one of the very important drive, because the other thing is, like, my kids stand apart, right? Like, they're willing to speak their mind. They of course know libertarian things that I tell them, right? And so, it's not just so it's both things, right? They're in a position to uh to stand out from the crowd, and it doesn't mean that they have to, it don't doesn't have to be in a weird way. It can be a way in which people can be, drawn to them, right? It can be a little
Hmm.
both, right? Maybe while they're younger and with their peers, it can be, but eventually I think it's going to be something that, like, they're willing to, like, already I see that, like, my kids are willing to speak up when that's actually it's sometimes like, uh, it's a good problem to have, right? Like, 'cause sometimes they do it to the point where it's like, they're bringing up problems so much that it's like, okay, guys, I can't go and talk to every parent at the playground about, like, the thing you see, right? Or at church, because sometimes it's like the kids are going to do inappropriate things, and you just gotta shrug it off and move on, right? But, like, when
Right.
they notice that something bad is happening, their instinct is to come and talk to me about it. And when they see someone getting hurt or someone getting picked on, they're like, that's not right. Like, that should be corrected. Like, they don't just go along with the crowd around them and
Hmm.
just be like, oh, someone's being mean to someone else and we're going to join in, or just
Right.
ignore it like it's not a problem. I'm like, okay, if they have that now as children, then I hope that they're going to continue to have that as adults, and that when they see injustice around them, that they will continue to speak out. And so it's like, I would rather them have that and, be too far in that direction, right? Than to just kind of, just kind of be like, look the other way. Like, unfortunately, a lot of people can be at times.
I agree. And yeah, I mean, it's worked for me thus far. I definitely have kids that are like, hey, that's wrong, have stood up for other people, have done, and it makes me so incredibly proud to have raised that type of human that, you know, isn't going to join the crowd, isn't going to be part of, little girls, especially at school, at, middle school age, they tend to be horrible to one another. And, I feel like I'm very blessed that my daughter didn't join in, for example. It'd be like,
Yeah.
oh my God, it's so horrible that they're not talking to so and so. So, like, yeah, I think that this is absolutely the way to go. I'm sure that the next generation will do even better than we are, as every generation seems to do. But yeah, I think that this is the way to go, to raise your kids to have that, you know, awareness of the world and to question things. One of the, changing the subject a little bit on my other favorite topic, one of the things that I think a lot of people don't do is question things. For me, that was circumcision. And it happened when everybody was complaining about transing children. It's like, well, children shouldn't have any surgery. It's like, I agree. You should also not give your newborn child a surgery they don't need. So, I think that questioning things is a real good place to be in, because that'll help you understand
Right.
um, you know just all sorts of things that it just happened, and a lot of people, it just happened to them, they aren't even aware of it. So questioning things is so important, and super proud of my kids for questioning stuff too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's and yeah, I haven't circumcised any of my kids, and
Good for
that's something
you.
you talked to Brent about too as well. And but it's important. Again,
It's
it's not from a
controversial.
place of it's it's not
It's
from a
controversial
place
amongst
of
libertarians, believe it or not.
oh, I know. Believe me, I know. And again, it's just I think normalizing in human relationships that that the libertarian axiom, right? Like you own yourself, you own your body, and no one else has a right to tell you what to do with your own body, unless you're, hurting, like, if you're hurting
Right.
someone, then that's you're breaking it, right? So the only legitimate use of force against someone is if they're using force against someone to stop them. And, it's really just applying that consistency. And so I think what we're doing here, I think just to, you know, put a bow on everything we've talked about is it's not that consistency doesn't matter. It's just that how do we get people to become more consistent? And I don't think that you do that by expecting people to just 100% move to you on every single position all at once, or you write them off and demonize them. And
Mm.
again, this is not like when I bring up these controversial things, I don't want people to hear me talking about this or you talking about this and we're saying you're horrible parents or you're horrible people if you don't agree with me or X, Y, or Z. Because I think at the end of the day, for the most part, the majority of the population, they are not anti peace or anti consent. They just haven't thought about these things through as much as we have. But like how do the way we get them to think about that more, I think starts with how we treat other people, which involves how we treat people like most immediately in our lives, our family, our children, our spouses. And then also like, are we just online complaining and attacking people? My video thing did
Yep.
something weird here. Okay. Um,
You're
and then also like, when injustice is happening, are we doing something about it? And so I think that, there is consistency, I think, in what we're advocating for, even if that means sometimes we have to, you know,
upset
swallow
a few
bitter
people.
pills
Yeah.
to advance some cause or whatnot.
Hmm.
Martha, do you have any closing thoughts before we go? And then also just to tell people where they can find you and the different things that you're doing, whether it's your social media handles and any other projects you want to plug.
Yeah, no. So like I said, I'm not quite ready yet to go with the um, helping people with their sentences, but we will be doing that. So look out for either Lynn or I. We will definitely be discussing it coming up soon. We intend to keep fighting for all of the children that don't have a mother like Lynn, who desperately need it. There's millions upon millions of people all across the United States in jails, prisons that shouldn't be there. And one way to fight back is to get them out. And there's nobody more libertarian or liberty leaning than people who just got out of jail. They've been through the system, they know how evil government is. And so I think that this is just, pardon the pun, but it's low hanging fruit. We can not only help people, but we can bring them to liberty and have them join our cause. So that is what I'm going to be working on in the future. In the meantime, you can check me out at Bueno for Miami on Instagram and on X. This coming 15th of April, I will be doing a talk at FIU with some great women, with Lola and with TPUSA. And then, of course, you can catch me at PorkFest, where I will be discussing the power of one, which is all about the journey I was on with Lynn Ulbricht. I think that, heroes like that, we often hear about sports stars or, politicians are heroes to some people. And the story of Lynn Ulbricht, what this woman has accomplished, what she did, again, not just in getting her son free, not just in moving that needle every day just a little bit more in the direction of freedom, but she never gave up, and she's I think an inspiration. Her belief that God was going to ultimately help her, I think, is a story that needs to be told. And as the person who had the front row seat, that is my job. Uh, God showed me that I don't need to have a magic wand. I don't need to be president or to be in office or to be whatever to bring freedom. He showed up. Freedom showed up one day at my house. A 70 plus year old woman, and I think that it's a huge inspiration, and I hope that she's an inspiration for other people, to take from her whatever lesson that you can take from her, and use it in your own life to push freedom forward in your little neck of the woods.
Awesome. Love it. Thank you, Martha, for being here, and hope to talk to you again sometime, because there's a lot more
Absolutely.
things we could definitely touch on. But this was a great conversation. Thanks everyone for listening. Make sure that you follow Martha. Make sure you follow this podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe and give a thumbs up. And if you're listening on Apple, Spotify, or whatever, please leave a 5-star review. And of course, you can check us out at libertarianchristians.com. I will be back here again next week live, and we'll be having a conversation with a critic, but a friend of mine who's a critic of everything we just talked about voting for Trump and everything like that. So that'll be a fun conversation with a good friend of mine, Jeremiah. So I'll be live, I think, about the same time, but check out, I'll probably have that up soon, so you guys can make sure you're subscribed and you'll get the information on that. But that's all I have for you guys for today. As I always conclude every show by saying, live at peace and live for Christ. Take care.
Thanks so much.